Hey guys, welcome to lesson number 2. If you've taken the time to listen to lesson number 1, we went over how to set up your workspace and get the different palettes arranged. Lesson number 2 is going to be how to use the different tools, some of the most common tools, and how to set them up. There's different settings in some of them that are very important to have in place before you get to started compositing. So let's get to work and show you how to use those. So this was the move tool. We learned that the quick key was V in the first lesson. I'm going to talk about a couple different settings on this. Just ignore the image for a second, and at the very top, there's going to be some different controls. If you don't see that, you can go to Window and you can click on Options. These are your options up here. I usually have my Move tool set up to auto select. So I have that checked. If it's not checked, go ahead and check it. And I'm going to check it for now and make sure it's the layer. I don't often use the setup for group. Most of the time it is the layers. And I have transform controls unchecked. That kind of tends to confuse things about if you're using the transform tool or whatever. So I typically have that unchecked also. So now that I have this auto select checked, if I click on any of the layers within this Photoshop document, it will automatically navigate to that specific layer. So for example, right now I'm on the subject layer. If I click on the background here, it will automatically navigate to the background. If I click on the sun, it automatically navigates to that sun layer. So it'll automatically select the layer you click on instead of having to go up here and navigate through and figure out which one. Oh, I want the background layer, come back. That takes too long. Just click on it. It automatically navigates to that. There is an exception to the rule, however. For example, this sun layer is kind of going over the subject here. If I try to click on the subject and maybe down here, it's still going to be selecting the sun layer because that sun layer actually is affecting that subject way down to here. But you can't even quite tell it. So sometimes you might have to click in another spot. But if I click down here again, it's going to navigate to the sun layer because there's kind of a very faint opacity of that layer over top of the subject. Now another tool I want to talk about the setup to is the brush tool. There's a bunch of different settings within the brush tool that people often don't have set up right and find it a little bit hard to navigate to. So I'm going to go to my brush tool. I'm going to hit B for my brush tool. So now that I'm on my brush tool, I can set up some things. So there's a variety of different controls again at the top here that go across the top. So right here is like a drop down box, tells you the different presets that are available for it. This will tell you that you can change the size and hardness, and you can switch between brushes here, and I can change the modes, which modes are a little bit more advanced, so we're going to stay away from that for now. I can change the opacity, flow, smoothing, and things like that. Honestly though, for the opacity and flow, for those on the opacity, if you want to change that very quickly, again, instead of navigating up to the top, I'm just going to hit whatever number I want. So I'm in the brush tool and I want 100% opacity, I'm going to hit 0. It's going to go to 100%. If I want 20% opacity, I hit 2 and it goes to 20. Does that make sense? It's very quick and easy to do that instead of having to navigate up there, use a slider or type in numbers. That takes way too long. Just hit those quick keys there. So for flow, if I hold shift and hit 4, it goes to 40. If I hit shift and hit 0, it goes to 100. And then on my smoothing, so for my smoothing on my brush, for the most part, I don't want that to be smoothing. I want that all the way down to 0. Smoothing tends to change your direction of your brush a little bit more than what I want typically. Sometimes it's useful. For the most part though, I have that at 0. Now let's talk about ways to access these different brushes. There's lots of brushes that you can get for Photoshop and that come included with Photoshop. I kind of showed you up here where you can click and use this drop down menu. But again, navigating all the way up to the top is something that takes time. Instead, if I'm on my brush tool, I can just right click and my brushes will pop up. If your brushes don't look like the way mine do, then there's some different settings that you can set up to see these a little bit easier. So these are my general brushes here. And up here are my settings. I'm going to drop down this, and this again is in Photoshop CC. In the older versions, you don't quite have as many options. You can still change sizes and rearrange stuff a little bit in there. But with Photoshop, I'm going to make sure my brush name and stroke are unchecked. So if it's checked here, like this, it kind of look weird and it might be even small. So that's kind of hard to see what's actually going on. So I don't need the name. I'm not interested in the name. I'm interested in what it looks like. I'm not interested in what the stroke looks like. I just want to see the shape of it. And then I'm going to increase my size here. I'm going to go ahead and crank that all the way up. So now that you have those set up, You can also change the size of your whole palette by dragging on that little corner here and making it as large as you want. So the next time you click on it, it should open up just like that. So if I click over here and then right click, it's going to open up with that brush palette. So again, brushes are something that I use very often, so it's very important to know how to access those quickly. There are a couple other different ways you can access your brushes that I'm going to talk about, just so that you know. If I am on my circle brush here, my round circle brush, and I want to change the size of it, if I'm on my brush tool, I can use my left and right bracket keys to change the size of it. So if I use my right bracket key, it's going to make it larger. If I hold down my left bracket key, it's going to make it smaller. So that will help you change sizes quickly if you don't even want to right click and use the size slider there. If you want to change your brush, you can use your greater than or less than symbols. So if I'm on, say I'm on using my light stream brushes, and these are some custom brushes I made, and I'm using this brush on a new layer and I stamp it. I obviously wouldn't be using this in this particular situation, but just to show you, if I want to go to the very next brush, I can use my greater than symbol and it will go to my next brush, and then my greater than symbol goes to the next brush. So I can easily tab through the different brushes if I'd want to do it that way too. So using your greater than and less than symbols will navigate to the previous brush or the next brush. So when I'm using my water brushes, my light stream brushes, my smoke brushes, often that's an easy way to navigate to the next brush in the series to get a variety of different looks. So one more option while you're in the brush tool. When you're in the brush tool, often you'll want to select a color. There is an eyedropper tool that you can navigate to and find that, click on it, come back over here. But hopefully by now you know my feelings about navigating off the side. And even this takes a little bit of time. Even if you know the eyedropper tool is I, it takes a little bit longer to hit that and then go back to B, navigating between those. Instead, a very quick way to select a color is hold Alt or Option down and it will bring up your eyedropper tool. And then you can select whatever color you click on. So for example, if I navigate over top of her, click on her shirt, it will be blue. If I navigate over top of the sun and click on that, it's white actually there. If I go off to the side and hold Alt or Option down, it will be yellow, and so forth. So you can easily navigate to your eyedropper tool when you're on your brush tool by holding Alt or Option down and navigate to the eyedropper tool. And then as soon as you let go of Alt or Option, the eyedropper tool goes away and will automatically be back on your brush tool. Some other quick things to navigate between colors here. So this color right now is yellow and black. If I want to reset my colors and go back to just black and white, that is hitting D. Just resets the color back to black and white. If I want to switch between my foreground and background colors, so if I want white to be in my foreground, right now if I draw, black's in my foreground. If I want to navigate to my background color, I'm going to hit X, and it's going to switch those around. I'm using white now. So I select a blue, and then I have a yellow in the background, and I want to navigate between those. I'm just going to hit X, goes to the other color. Then one last technique I use when I'm using color is often I use color to fill an entire background or fill a specific area of the background. So I'm going to create a new layer just for this example here. So I'm going to click on this little plus button. It creates a new layer. I'll go over these a little bit later. But with this, I create a new layer and I say I want to fill with my background color, which is yellow. To fill with my background color, I'm going to hit Control or Command and backspace. And it's going to fill with that entire color. If I want to fill with my foreground color, for example, in this instance is blue, I'm going to hit Alt or Option and backspace, and it's going to fill with my foreground color. So it's a very quick and easy way to fill with a solid color. And this is very useful and something I often use to create scenes and fill in specific areas or mask things off. We'll talk more about all that in a little bit, but just to reference how to use your color palette here and switch between it. Again, just a quiz here. How do you reset your colors to black and white? D. To reset your black and white colors. To switch between them is X. And to fill with a solid color, I'm going to fill with my background color. I'm going to hit Control or Command backspace, and it fills with that solid color. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer here so we go back to the original. So many of these brushes have different options in them that you can set up or change around. But for now, I wanted to go over the basics of making sure that Move tool is set up for you, because that's a very common tool that many people forget about, that auto select layer. And the brushes, having your brushes palette set up so it's easy to navigate between and choose different brushes. Now let's talk about the Magic Wand tool. On the Magic Wand tool here, this is something I use quite a bit in Photoshop to select things and to extract things. On this Magic Wand tool, there are actually two different brushes in here. There's a Magic Wand tool and a Quick Selection tool. Both these are super useful. You can see that the quick key is W on both of these. I actually use these so often that I choose to change the quick key for this Quick Selection tool to something else that I can easily access instead of going down and navigating and having to switch between these. I'm going to go all the way down and we're going to set up this a little bit differently. So I'm going to go to these three dots here, drag off to the side and say Edit Toolbar. And in this Edit Toolbar, I can go down to my Quick Selection tool, click on that W there, and I'm going to type in R. I choose to change this to R, which is typically reserved for rotate. I believe if I scroll all the way down toward the bottom, the rotate view tool, I don't like that, so I have actually deleted the R off that. I hate that tool. It's very annoying. If you accidentally click on it, it rotates your whole screen sideways and then you have to work to get it straightened back out. Some painters kind of like it, but to be honest, as a compositor, I almost never ever use that. By reassigning my Quick Selection tool to R, now I can switch in between them and go W, goes to my Magic Wand tool, R will go to my Quick Selection tool. There are a few other things in that box I wanted to mention in the Edit Toolbar section. There are some extra tools that I've moved that I never use also. So on the pencil tool, I believe that is usually under the brush tool here, and I never use my pencil tool. I don't like it, and I don't like when I accidentally click on it because it messes me up. So I've dragged that off to the side and said, I don't want to see you anymore. Any of the things you put over here are things that you don't want to see again for now. You can always drag them back if you want to, but it's kind of convenient if you don't use them at all, just to get rid of them. So these are the tools that I almost never use. Actually, I use the brush mixer tool a little bit, but I've disabled the quick key for it. So I've deleted the quick key. So whenever I hit B, it only goes to my brush tool. If I need it in the drop down box, I can still grab it, but it's there. I'm also going to disable shortcuts for hidden toolbar extras. I'm going to hit done. Now I pretty much have my toolbar set up for the way I want it. It's going to be convenient if your Photoshop happens to shut down or restart, something like that. You can have this set up instantly for you. So you can go up to your Windows, navigate down to Workspace, and you can say New Workspace, and you can save this to whatever you want. So I've labeled mine as Shirk Compositing Workspace. And I've checked these and hit save so that anytime if there's an update and something happens to go crazy, I can just go to Windows, Workspace, Shirk Compositing Workspace, and it's all set up and ready to go. So there are a lot of different ways to do things in Photoshop. You know, one way, there's probably 10 other different ways to do the same thing. I'm just trying to give you that great foundation so that as you're compositing, you're not stumbling around within the Photoshop here. So on the third lesson coming up, I want to talk a little bit more about the control and command keys to make sure you're fluent with those. Things like transform, resize, open, save, cut, paste, just to have those keys down for you. And then very soon we're going to get into the compositing. So I hope to see you soon. And there are all kinds of ways to do things in Photoshop. If you use Photoshop long enough, you're going to discover all kinds of crazy things that go on. I'm just trying to give you a good foundation so that you can start with your compositing.